My own mother tried to drown my daughter because she spilled juice. I'm not exaggerating, she actually did. Asterisk, that's what hit me like a punch to the chest the moment my phone blew up with frantic calls. I'm Jake Lawson, 35, long-haul truck driver based in Seattle, and my daughter, Lily, is 7. What happened that Tuesday afternoon at my mum's house is something I'll never unsee, never forget, and will haunt me forever if I ever let myself think too much about it. It started like any ordinary day. I was working from home, juggling dispatch calls, trying to line up deliveries without dropping the ball. My mother, Diane, a 63-year-old retired school principal who thought she knew everything about raising kids, had been begging me for weeks to let her spend time with Lily. She needs to bond with family, she said. Against my instincts, I agreed. That was my first mistake. I dropped Lily off around 1 p.m. at Diane's house, a neat, quiet place in a gated Seattle neighborhood. Diane greeted us with that rigid, tight-lipped smile that always made me uneasy. She looked Lily up and down, noticing the juice stains on her dinosaur t-shirt and paint spots on her jeans. "Couldn't you wear something nicer?" she asked. My stomach sank. "Mom, it's just for a few hours. She's had lunch, keep her away from the pool, and if anything seems off, call me immediately," I said. Her wave dismissed all my warnings. "Jake, I raised 3 kids. I can handle one little girl for an afternoon. That should have been my cue to leave." But I had a 2 p.m. call with a client about a major shipment one I couldn't miss. I told myself nothing could go wrong in just 3 hours. I trusted my mum. How wrong I was. By 3:40 p.m., my phone exploded. First my brother, then my uncle, then unknown numbers. Panic didn't hit me, yet I assumed family drama. But then my brother texted, asterisk, "Answer your phone. Lily's hurt." I dropped everything, grabbed my keys, and raced out the door. 20 minutes on the road felt like an eternity. My heart thumped so hard I thought it would burst. When I arrived, flashing lights and an ambulance greeted me. My Uncle Tom, wrapped in a soaked towel, looked like the color had drained from his face. "Jake," he started, but I cut him off. "Where's Lily?" He pointed to the ambulance. She was breathing, but barely. My stomach dropped. I ran toward her, climbing into the ambulance. She was wrapped in blankets, lips blue, hair soaked, barely responsive. "Lily, baby, I'm here," I whispered, gripping her tiny hand. Her eyes fluttered open, and she let out those quiet, broken sobs that cut straight through my soul. A paramedic explained that Lily had been found in the pool. Hypothermic, not breathing initially. They were monitoring her for respiratory complications. I couldn't believe it. My mother, my own mother, had done this. I had warned her about Lily's trauma, her fear of water after what happened with her mother, my late wife, Rachel. My gut had screamed at me, but I ignored it. And now this nightmare was real. Tom pulled me aside and recounted what had happened. Lily had knocked over some juice and markers. Diane had yelled, grabbed her arm, dragged her toward the pool. Lily had fought, tried to pull away, but Diane kept pushing, insisting the girl needed to learn respect. Then she did the unthinkable, pushed Lily straight into the water. My daughter, terrified of pools, unable to swim, sank immediately. Tom jumped in after, but I was the first to reach her and perform CPR. 90 seconds felt like hours before she coughed up water and started breathing again. I had never been so scared in my life, And as my shaking hands gripped the flash drive with security footage Tom had managed to grab, I knew one thing: my mother would pay for this. She wasn't going to hurt Lily or any child ever again. The hospital smelled like bleach and fear. I remember every little sound: the beeping monitor, the soft shuffle of shoes on linoleum, the low murmur of nurses, like it was amplified to a painful clarity. Lily was tiny against the hospital sheets, a fragile thing that should have been safe in her own bed at home. Instead, she lay there, trembling, blank-eyed, as if the water had sucked something essential out of her and left a hollow behind. Doctors hustled around us, but I heard most of what they said as if through cotton. Hypothermia, Dr. Lee had told me earlier. Aspiration pneumonitis. We've got to monitor her airway. It sounded clinical and far away. What hit me harder were the silences. Lily's silence. My mother's silence when she spoke. She sounded like someone else. And the silence of the rest of my family when they looked at me as if waiting to see what I would do. The first night in the PICU, I slept in a stiff chair beside her bed because I couldn't bear to be more than an arm's length away. Every time Lily made a small, involuntary noise, I shot upright, chest tight. When she finally opened her eyes and focused on me, there was this tiny, broken light recognition without trust. "Dad," she whispered one time, and the desperation in that one syllable made my knees go weak. I told her everything would be okay, and I meant it with all the fierce, ugly protectiveness I'd been holding back for months. Within hours, the legal machine had started grinding. The paramedics' report, Uncle Tom's statement, and the security footage, 47 seconds, that would not leave my head, were in the hands of the detective. Detective Ellis was efficient, a woman used to not letting people's emotions get in the way of facts. She watched the footage 3 times in a row and didn't look away. "We'll file charges," she said quietly. It felt like a relief and a threat at the same time. Relief, because finally someone else was seeing what I'd seen. Threat, because it confirmed the worst truth I'd been trying to avoid. My mother had done this. Deliberately. CPS came that same day. A kind but professional social worker named Daniel. Pa sat with me in a small family room and asked questions that felt like needles probing at wounds. He asked about Lily's history, about Rachel, about the therapy we'd been doing with Dr. Walsh. I told him everything the day Rachel died. The months of silence, the painstaking work to coax Lily back into the world. He wrote it down. His face tightened. "Given what we've seen and the medical report, I'm recommending an emergency protective order," he said. Emergency protective order. Those words sounded like armor. When I finally let myself breathe, a rage like a physical thing sat in my chest. It wasn't immediate catharsis. It was slow, deliberate, a cold planning. I thought about what Helen had taken from us, not just a scary afternoon, but months and years of painstaking progress. I thought about how she'd sneered at therapy, dismissed Dr. Walsh's advice, and called my caution weakness. I thought about Lily coughing up water, about her blue lips, about the soft, terrified breath that followed. I hired Jessica, a family law attorney, that night. She looked at the security footage once, and then at me, with a combination of professional anger and cautious empathy. "We'll get a restraining order," she said. "We'll file civil claims. We'll make sure she can't hurt your daughter again." There was work to be done, medical records to collect, witness statements from neighbors who'd seen Helen's temper, Uncle Tom's eyewitness account, and, most important, The video that showed Helen's hand pushing Lily into the pool. I remember, in the quiet hours, watching Lily sleep and thinking about the small things that had changed. She wouldn't climb into a bath by herself anymore. Showers had to be quick. I stood just outside the bathroom door, not inside, because even being in the room set her off. She flinched at the sound of splashing, at the word pool. Dr. Walsh increased our sessions. We did grounding exercises, naming 5 things in the room, taking slow breaths, squeezing a stress ball into little fingers until the panic passed. Tiny, brutal victories. The first time she drew a sun that looked like a sun again instead of a jagged black circle. I cried in my truck like an idiot. Family reactions were predictable and ugly. I called my siblings and sent them the footage. I could not live with this quiet. Within hours, the phone calls came. Kyle's voice shaking, Bridget crying until she could barely speak. People I'd assumed would defend my mother saw what I did and recoiled. Mom's friends dropped away. The church that had once praised her dedication began to distance itself. Her social life, which had been a shield for decades, dissolved like tissue paper. I felt guilty for the public consequences. Watching a life unravel is not something to take pleasure in, but it was a small, private guilt compared to the immense duty I felt to protect Lily. There were legal steps, like a macabre checklist. Filed the police report, done. Hand over the footage, done. Speak with prosecutors, done. File for emergency custody and a restraining order, done. Meanwhile, the civil suit we drafted on Lily's behalf listed medical expenses, projected therapy costs, and a figure for pain and suffering that made my head swim. Jessica was ruthless in the right way. She wanted to make sure Helen could not simply shrug and go on. I wanted consequences, not revenge. But sometimes those lines blur. Watching Helen's life collapse was surreal. Within days, neighbors I'd thought were friendly sent statements about her yelling at kids, grabbing them roughly, being cold and cruel. Had we all been living next to a monster and pretending not to see? I kept thinking about the children she'd supervised at school for 30 years, and the parents who'd complained but were silenced by tenure and reputation. That reputation protected her until a camera, a few minutes, and the truth destroyed it at the hospital. Lily began to speak in fragments. The first word after the incident was Dad, and each syllable was like a tiny stitch pulling us back together. She retracted into herself sometimes, and for a while nights were prayers and rituals, counting breaths. Turning on a soft nightlight, the same children's book read on loop until her eyes closed. We made new rules: no unsupervised visits, no contact, locks changed, cameras installed. We whispered about how to explain to a 7-year-old that the person who was supposed to protect her had become the person who hurt her. Through it all, a steady, stubborn thing kept me going. The knowledge that Lily was alive and that, as long as I could breathe, I would keep her safe. The court filings, the testimonies, the lists of expenses and appointments, it all felt secondary to the simple, literal need of keeping her alive and well. There would be more pain to come: court dates, testimony, the indignity of seeing Helen in handcuffs if it came to that. But there was also healing, slow as molasses. A small laugh in the backyard. A drawing pinned to the fridge. Each one felt like a small, stubborn revolution. And underneath it all was a deeper lesson. I hadn't wanted to learn that family is not a guarantee of safety. Sometimes family hurts. Sometimes family betrays. And sometimes justice is the only way to make a fragile thing whole again. Weeks turned into months, and the blur of hospital visits, court dates, and therapy sessions began to settle into a rhythm. Lily's small victories became our milestones, sleeping through the night without nightmares, laughing at silly cartoons, and even dipping her toes cautiously into a shallow pool under my watchful eyes. Each tiny step felt monumental proof that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt. Slowly and carefully, court day arrived like a storm. Helen sat across the room, defiant, attempting to maintain the poise that had fooled so many before. I felt a mixture of anger, fear, and an odd, icy detachment. The judge's eyes were sharp, piercing. I knew the evidence, the video, the witness testimonies. The medical reports would speak louder than any of Helen's excuses. Jessica leaned over and whispered, "Stick to facts. No emotion. She can't twist your words." But I knew the truth carried its own weight. When the footage played, there was a hush in the courtroom. Faces paled. The subtle cruelty, the deliberate shove, the way Helen's expression shifted arrogance to panic was undeniable. Lily's cough, the way she flailed, the gasps of witnesses all combined into a moment that crystallized years of silent fear. Helen tried to speak, but her voice faltered. The room didn't need her words. The evidence spoke. The judge ruled swiftly. Emergency protective orders. Full custody granted to me, and mandatory therapy for Lily. Civil claims moved forward, demanding restitution for medical costs and psychological care. Helen's world, carefully curated for decades, began unraveling in public, exposing not only her actions, but the pattern of manipulation and cruelty hidden behind a polite smile. Outside the courtroom, Lily clung to me. "Daddy, we're safe now," she whispered. I held her tighter than ever. "Yes, baby, we're safe. And we're going to stay that way." Her tiny hands wrapped around mine felt like a promise and a lifeline. At home, we began creating new rituals. Weeknight dinners, morning walks, and bedtime stories became anchors in a life that had been violently shaken. We celebrated milestones that others might see as small. Lily finishing a drawing without erasing it, sleeping without nightmares, smiling without fear. Each one was a quiet victory over trauma. Therapy sessions revealed the deep scars left by Helen's betrayal. Dr. Walsh guided us through exercises in trust and safety, helping Lily articulate her fear and teaching me how to respond without panic, without letting anger spill over. The process was slow, frustrating, and painful, but transformative. Lily learned that her feelings were valid, that she could express anger, sadness, or fear without shame. And I learned how to hold space for her healing while managing my own anger and grief. Family dynamics shifted permanently. Some relatives, once loyal to Helen, avoided us. Others stepped forward with apologies and support. The truth had forced choices, alliances, and reckonings. We learned to navigate holidays and gatherings carefully, placing Lily's safety above tradition or obligation. Each decision became an act of protection, a reminder that family is more than blood, it's about trust and care. Months later, I found myself reflecting on the chaos, the betrayal, and the fear. The experience had left a wound that would never fully disappear, but it had also revealed resilience I didn't know I had. I had become an advocate, not only for Lily, but for other children silenced by fear, navigating the complexities of family betrayal. One evening, Lily crawled into my lap, her small body warm and heavy with sleep. She whispered, "I love you, Daddy," and I felt the full weight of everything we'd endured and overcome. It was in that quiet moment I understood the truth. Safety is fragile, trust is earned, and love, above all, is the force that rebuilds broken worlds. The fight wasn't over. Helen's legal appeals loomed, and therapy would continue for years. But for the first time, we were moving forward not as victims, but as survivors. And in every cautious step Lily took toward trust, I saw hope reborn, a reminder that even after betrayal, life could be reclaimed, one small victory at a time. The day finally came when I had to face Helen again, not in court, but in the stark room of a mediation session, under the watchful eyes of lawyers and a counselor. The air was tense, heavy with unspoken words. Helen sat across from me, her posture rigid, lips pressed thin, trying to summon the calm of someone who still believed she could manipulate reality. Lily wasn't present. She didn't need to witness the storm, but her presence lingered in my mind with every breath I took. I thought about the months of therapy, the slow rebuilding of trust, and the small but monumental victories we had earned together. I had become unflinchingly aware of the strength that protecting her required. Helen began with excuses, her voice smooth but hollow. I didn't mean for anything to happen like that. You're exaggerating. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the cracks, the fear, the defensiveness, the facade of control faltering. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't attack. I simply laid out the facts, documented incidents, therapy reports, witness statements. The evidence spoke louder than any anger I could have expressed. You've caused lasting harm. Helen, I said, quietly, deliberately. Lily deserves safety, consistency, and love, not fear. And I will ensure she gets that, no matter what you say. For a brief moment, Helen's eyes flickered with recognition, maybe guilt, maybe panic. But it was fleeting. She tried to interrupt, tried to twist the narrative, but the mediator cut in. Boundaries were set. Terms were clarified. The session ended with a formal agreement. Supervised visits, therapy requirements, and strict communication protocols. Helen had no choice but to comply. Walking out of that building, I felt a weight lift from my chest. I was exhausted, emotionally raw, but free from the shadow of manipulation that had loomed over our lives. Lily's safety, our life, was finally secured by law, by therapy, and by the unshakable resolve we had built together. At home, I hugged Lily, feeling the warmth of her small body against mine. We're really safe now, I whispered. She smiled sleepily, the fear in her eyes replaced with a quiet trust. I know, Daddy. Months turned into a year. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and ordinary days with newfound joy. The trauma had left scars, yes, but it had also forged resilience. Lily learned to voice her feelings without fear, and I learned to be both protector and guide without letting anger consume me. I became an advocate, sharing our story carefully, helping other parents navigate the treacherous waters of family betrayal. I realized that our experience, though painful, could empower others to protect their children and reclaim their lives in quiet moments. I reflected on how fragile trust can be and how powerful love is when it refuses to let fear dictate its course. Facing Helen had been terrifying, but it was necessary. Without confrontation, healing would have been incomplete. By standing firm, setting boundaries, and insisting on truth, we reclaimed the narrative of our lives. Lily's laughter became the soundtrack of our home, proof that survival is possible, that love can endure, and that even after betrayal, a life rebuilt with care, courage, and unwavering protection can flourish. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were thriving, in every small victory, every smile. Every bedtime story was a reminder that darkness doesn't last forever when love and resilience guide the way.